If you want to learn more about effective management, head over to mattsingers.com and sign up for my free management training.
Welcome to the Mad Singers Management Podcast from madsingers.com, where entrepreneurs and business managers learn and share. If you like the show, don't forget to leave a review.
Hello, and welcome back to the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Today I'm joined by Renata Porter. Welcome, Renata.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. I'm super excited to have you on board today. We're going to talk about management as usual on the podcast. But before we get into all the fun stuff, would you mind letting people know how you ended up where you are today and what some of the fun things you've been doing in life so far?
Great. I have spent the last, 13 years, 10 years prior to the last three, I had been spending going around New Zealand and working in organizations to where, basically I sum it up as a serial fixer. I'd be brought in to fix a massive project, build a team that's not working, work with managers that aren't working well together. And through that, I realized I really, enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting teams to recognize each other and work with each other, getting managers to recognize where their gaps were and where they excelled and enabling them to be better managers. And then from there, I kind of decided that I was going to go off on my own and actually do this as a consultant. And we decided to move back, we decided to move back home from New Zealand. So I kicked it off when I moved here. And I completely underestimated how hard it would be to start a business out of being out of the country for 10 years and not really having any recent contacts to help me get things built. So it's been 3 years and I'm just starting to really get my stride, but boy, it was a lot of mental anguish, and there's still plenty of days of mental anguish of, man, did I make the right decision? But yeah, so the last 3 years I've been working with a few startups, and then I've really started to find my niche working with nonprofit youth sports organizations that really struggle with that whole leadership, who does what, responsibilities, how do you keep people accountable, and no different than any startup where, where's your processes, why are you doing the things that you're doing, that kind of thing. So that's what I've been doing lately.
Oh, that's very easy. You just tell people what to do and then they do it.
You'd be amazed at how many people would just prefer that you just tell them what to do instead of them making a decision. So it's pretty crazy, but
cool. Yeah. So one of the things I really like, so you've been working a lot in IT, even though you're not IT-ish. And this is one of my favorite things is when people work in areas they don't know very well, because my experience is you see managers as much better managers when they aren't the experts. Because the problem with a lot of managers when they are the experts is they end up doing stuff and they end up interfering in stuff they shouldn't. Whereas the benefit of being a manager in a place where you don't know what people are doing is the fact that you actually have to, I know there's a big word, but trust your employees. And
yes, absolutely.
That is something that's actually helpful to a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. There's way too many managers that get sucked into the doing because they feel like they know how to do it right, instead of pulling back and getting into the leadership role of discovering what is the right way, whether it's your way or someone else's way, and then directing people, So yeah, I agree. So when I moved to New Zealand, it took me a while to get work. And my job previous to that was at Microsoft in Seattle, but I was just a project coordinator working with, they brought people in across all over the world to do their training before they sent them back out to where they were working. So somebody just saw Microsoft on my resume and assumed I knew IT. And I wasn't going to argue because I needed work. So I was thrown into project management work, thinking that I knew about IT. And then I don't even have to tell you, even being out of work for a year, how far behind I was. But anyways, so I worked my way through it. And then just for some reason, I just stayed in that IT arena and worked my way back up. And And then I was the last role, paid role that I was working for somebody else, was a director of an IT department. But I think that was mainly because, just the recognition of being able to manage and pull teams together. I had somebody that referred me in, and it worked really well, which is really funny in meetings a lot of times, because people weren't used to having somebody go, I can't give you the answer. All I can do is help you work through it and try to poke holes in it, and let's make sure that it's the right answer, right? So they were very set back, or put on the back foot of like somebody who's not going to tell them, no, it has to be this way. I was always no, let's discover it. Let's figure it out. Why do you feel it's that way? Why do you feel it's that way? It's very different for them.
and I guess IT wise, right? Like, I mean, one of my big benefits, I used to work for IBM and Xerox and big organizations, and I did a lot of roles sort of in like analytics and with numbers, and also working with IT people and so on. And the one thing I was very good at was to actually communicating, right? So the problem normally when you work with IT teams is their ability to communicate in a way that other humans understand is pretty close to non-existing.
Yes.
And I'm sure that's also a huge benefit, like having someone like yourself in an IT department, because you can actually communicate with the rest of the company, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, if I go back to my last job again, I mean, that was a big hurdle for everybody to get over, is that I was really communicative. I was very conversational. I hated being the only one talking. I couldn't stand it. And I really started to doubt myself about 6 months in, because I just could not get them. And it was a trust issue, right? So I could not get them to speak up, right? So that's when you like really need to dig deep and think, like I was telling you before, I really believe a manager or a leader, a business owner, CEO, I don't care what role you are, if you have people who report into you, you have to connect with them on some level, right? So I think that I really had to dig deep and go, why am I not reaching these people? Why do they feel like they can't, give me feedback? And I had to really I had to put it on the table just as that, listen, I need your input. I value your input. If it doesn't work, okay, let's learn from it. Let's have a lessons learned session, a real one, not a bullshit one where everybody's afraid to talk, let's have a real lessons learned, and let's make sure we document it so we don't mess it up, or learn, let's learn from it so we don't do it again. And once I was able to do those kinds of things and like start paying it, you learn your group. So you learn body language, somebody's got something to say, but they're not saying it. So you learn to pull it out from them. So, I think it's a big thing that a lot of managers and people who lead others don't really do, and take the time to really like understand what's going to make the other person speak up, trust the environment, put forward their best ideas and their best work, really.
And I mean, I always say the most important thing is that you do as a manager is build relationship with your staff, right? Like you're not going to get anywhere near the best performance if you don't have a good relationship with them. And I always use the same example, right? But reality is, if one of your friends phone you up and say, hey, can you help me move this weekend? If you say yes or no, generally depend how good a friend they are, right? And it works the same way with staff. If they need to put in their best work, if they need to work a few hours extra someday, or if there's something where they really have to put in their extra effort, it depends how good a relationship you have with them. You don't need to be their friend. You need them to respect you, and you need to have a good relationship with them. Right.
And I think what's a big problem is that, you said it earlier, where people become managers, or, they go to the next step in middle management because they know how to do something. We don't spend any time, but companies don't spend any time training on what it means to actually lead other people, right? People just assume because they know how to do the job, they know how to lead others. And they are two completely different things, right? And most people go in and it's very dictatorial. And even though everybody conceptually understands that doesn't work, it's still the process, right? So what is the statement? Common sense doesn't always equal common practice, right? So you know that your approach isn't working, but you just keep doing it because you don't know any better. And I put that back on our leadership in these companies. Like, they don't spend time. And then if they do, they don't spend time training. And then if they do, it's so high level that it doesn't actually relate to the individual, right? So I wish companies would like make a focus about, what is leadership in their company? What does that mean? And then like, let's bring it down into actual steps. Like, what does this concept mean for me or this person? And that way they can actually understand it. They can conceptualize it. They can visualize how it's going to work with this person, how it's going to work with this person. And I think we do our people a great disservice. And that's why there's so many people unhappy at work. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but there's so many people unhappy at work. And that's just because they don't feel valued. They don't work in a trusted, environment. Again, common sense doesn't equal common practice. And it's really sad.
This is why I exist. And this is exactly the reason why I do what I do. Right. So my biggest passion is exactly that, training both business owners, but also managers within the business. Now, you're right. A lot of the time, business owners and high-level managers don't spend the time training. Reality is the main reason they don't is, one, no one ever trained them. And two, they don't even often know why they do what they do. So even though they've done it for many years and they're not as bad anymore, they haven't spent much time thinking what actually makes them good. And therefore they don't know how to train, right?
Right.
So the fundamental for me, like, I've walked into many, many organizations. I've worked in many organizations. I've worked in very, very large companies that do as equal a bad job as very small businesses. Reality is just, in the business world, there's not generally a sense of focus on training and developing not just the leaders you have, but also the leaders of tomorrow, right?
Absolutely.
And that is, for me, that's probably the number one business challenge that many growing companies face, because they often end up hiring people from externally. Mm-hmm. And the problem is when you're constantly overlooking your own staff and favoritizing external people who might likely come in and might not have the skill set either, but at least have done a similar role previously. You are doing yourself a huge disservice most of the time, right? And I see so many small to mid-sized businesses that are really struggling to grow just because there isn't a solid management framework. There isn't a solid way of, as a business, this is what we do.
Right. I agree. I think there needs to be a balance on promoting within and developing within, because they have the institutional knowledge, right? And the institutional knowledge isn't always, it's always been done this way. It's always been done this way. What's your idea to making it better, right? So, or it's always been done this way, so you need to carry it on. It could be very regimental, like if you're building something, right, it probably has to be that way. So you want to bring people in who have that institutional knowledge, but sometimes you need to elevate your game and you survey and you look, you don't have it, you need help, right? So there's nothing wrong with asking for help and bringing people in to do whatever it is that you need them to do. I think there just needs to be a good balance there.
Yep. Definitely. And I what I always say and what I always do with my business is, like, you need to develop the people that you need for the future. The problem is, if you have a manager resigning today and you need someone to replace him, that is not the day to start thinking about who's that replacement, right? You need to know that. Right. If you have a manager leaving, you have to be very, very clear on who is going to do that job when that manager leaves. Yeah. And honestly, if you don't know that, you probably haven't done your job well as a business owner or as a leader, right?
I think with startups, they kind of get in that spin mode. And I say it all the time, quit looking at your feet and lift your head, right? Look forward, right? Quit looking at your feet. And I know it's the problem with startups is they plug and plug and plug. And then all of a sudden it's like, I got so much business, I don't know what to do, right? So they're always spinning, like, how do I fix this? And then they get in that habit of not looking up and going, okay, so this is what we're doing. This is what I'm going to need in 6 months. This is what I'm going to need in 12 months, right? And sometimes they don't know, but I think if they actually gave themselves permission to work through it, set the time aside to work through it, they probably could, right? And that's where like somebody like you or a coach or a mentor would really, really helps them to think forward and look forward. And then, if it doesn't work out that way, it's okay. They got to be okay with things kind of not working out. But if you don't plan for it, it's definitely not going to work out, right? So, yeah.
To the plan, that's one of the big things I see. So I believe fundamentally that companies need holistic plans that cover the whole organization. I see it so often in companies where they're like, oh yeah, let's double our sales and let's invest a lot in the sales team. I'm like, wait a minute, what does that mean for the rest of the organization?
Yes.
Right? And then what happens is then they get a huge bottleneck in operations or cash flow or whatever. And they're suddenly like, oh, now we have all these orders, but we didn't think about having people to
on the
actually
back end,
deal
how are you
with
going to
them.
get them out?
Right. And it's like, and that's why like it's so fundamentally important and really to drive a business forward, right? You need to have plans that are business level plans. And as soon as a company starts growing above a certain size, I see this time and time again where those departments are not, they're being driven individually. It's kind of like, okay, sales manager, what do you want your goal to be? Okay, operations manager, what do you want your goal to be? And so on, right? And it's not combined. It's not part of a plan. It is individual plans, individuals' goals for individual people.
And you have no idea if they match up.
Exactly.
I think you're right. I think that's a good combination. Like if the senior management could set a direction and a plan, and then as all the department heads, like, I may be talking about a big organization, but you have little organizations that got 3 people, right? So, but you still need their input of, this is our goal, this is where we want to go. How are we going to do it? Does that make sense? How does that affect, and then get everybody's feedback. So everybody's kind of marching in the same direction instead of going, trying to work it out because I planned it this way and you planned it that way. It's no different than, I do a lot of visions and values work with people. And I see a lot of time that it's just wasted. It just becomes words on a poster, or little tchotchkes on people's desk. And I think one thing I do with my clients is I take a step forward and I go, okay, so what behaviors do you want people to do in order to live up to those values so you can reach your vision? Because until they actually like put that process in place and understand how they're actually going to walk the walk and ensuring that, that walk the walk is suitable from the top to the bottom to the top, that everybody can do this. People can start conceptualizing, okay, so what does integrity mean? That means that, I'm going to be transparent, right? Okay, so what does that mean? Speak your mind, in an appropriate way, whatever those behaviors are. So I think when you start to model those and you start talking about those and using those buzzwords, then it kind of like puts the values into action. And I think that's a big thing that's missing. I think, really with consultants a lot, it's all about too high level. It's all about theory. And it drives me insane. No, I want actions. If I don't leave you with knowing exactly how you're going to march your way forward, then I haven't done my job. All I've done is collected money from you and left you in the same pot of confusion.
Totally agree. And
sorry for the other consultants who may be listening, but that's just how I feel. I just feel like we do people a disservice by not actually working through the steps and going way too high level.
Yeah, the problem is and that's sometimes also the company's problem, but when you're not responsible for implementation, then in 99% of the case, things won't be implemented, right? Yeah. And I think, like, as a coach, I mean, I'm pretty proud to say I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people, and I've never had an unhappy customer. That is also because I pick my customers, right? So again, like, I've worked with people where I know I will win. I work with people that, I know are going to benefit from what I do. But the whole thing is that if I'm seriously in doubt, like I'm not going to work with them. And it's not because I don't trust myself, but it's because I want to make sure that customers have a solid return from working with me. Because if they don't, then it's not worth their time and it's not worth my time.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm hearing is you're saying that you work with people who are willing to be open to hearing what needs to be said and to developing an implementation plan. I mean, that's
the fundamental piece for me is making sure. So often what I do is I don't just work with the business owner. A lot of the time, you have consultants sit down with the business owner and say, oh, you should do this, and this. Right. The way I typically operate is I work with the business owner and their management team. Yep. And basically make sure they all have a solid management system to follow. And it's relatively simple, but the whole thing is when you have a system as a company that you can march to, then the whole world just becomes an easier place, right? And it's not, a lot of the time, it's not about complexity. It's not about all these fancy words. It's about, simple things. How do you put the right people in the right jobs? How do you have the right meetings, and how do you how to build relationship with your staff, and how do you hire and fire people? And it's those basic things that when you have a solid system for that as a company, then the likelihood of you succeeding is just, it increases so much, right?
I'm with you. I'm the same way. And often if you're working with just the management, their perception of what's happening and why things are happening is usually really skewed. It's not accurate. So it's having those conversations with the management and then building the bridge of going, okay, this is what you see. This is what they see. Sometimes they're at odds. Sometimes it's like a big, I didn't understand or know that,
And that's exactly
so bridging that gap, right?
That's exactly what I enjoy when I talk with both the business owners and their staff. Then like being able to have those conversations, because you can ask people, oh, have you talked with people about this? And they'll be like, yeah, totally. And they obviously, they either haven't or they haven't gotten the right responses from it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'm with you.
Excellent. Yeah, but I think generally, putting ideas in people's heads is great, but the biggest problem that I see if you leave people with something to do, particularly busy entrepreneurs and smaller business owners, then often it doesn't get done, right?
Yeah.
Even if they know it's the right thing to do. So like a lot of the time you really have to help with the implementation. You have to help with the follow-up and so on, right?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times, like I just left an organization in California, and I feel like a lot of times I become an accountability partner, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like that constant follow-up. Okay, so did you do X? How did it go? If it didn't work, don't be afraid to tell me. Let's just work through it. Let's figure out why. Let's try something else. Or is it because you didn't understand, and that kind of thing. So I think a lot of times for me, and that's part of my proposal with companies is that, listen, anything that I work with you on, you have me for a year on that. Right. So I'm with you for a year. I'm committed to your success. I don't want to just plop something on you and then walk away. It doesn't do either one of us any good. So I'm committed to working with these companies, and I think, it's not always about the companies either. It's also about those individuals who lead others. They actually need to be proactive. If your company is not fulfilling your needs for training and education and support as a leader, you need to go out and read. You need to go find information yourself. And it doesn't mean that so many people, everybody has tunnel vision. They get this book. This is an awesome book. This isn't going to work for me. And they toss it, right? No, I bet you there was one or two things in there that you could relate to. All right. You can relate to them. How can you make them work for you? Right. So if we're telling you to build trust with and rapport with your staff, and they give you little ways to do it, that might work for 50% of the people that you lead, but there's another 50% that's not going to work for. So you got to figure out how you're going to relate to them, because they behave differently, they operate differently. They may be a more defensive type individual. So you have to figure out a way to crack that. So, I say, go out and find your own information. If you get one tidbit out of what you've read, you are way ahead. Okay, so you got the knowledge, then you need to put the knowledge in place. And just because it doesn't work the first time doesn't mean it's going to work, especially if you're in an environment where there's no trust. They're not going to trust this new you. They're not going to trust this new approach, right? So you got to repeat, show that you're there and you're willing, and that's the other thing is a lot of new managers will give up on a process because it didn't work the first time. Well, shit, when does anything work on the first time? Really?
Yeah, totally. I agree. And I think fundamentally, like for a lot of companies, right, you both have like looking at new things and doing new things, and that's difficult, right? But I think fundamentally what you need to look at is also simplification sometimes, right? Because I think many companies really struggle from always trying to do too many things.
Mm-hmm.
And really what I see effective management being is, I mean, it's 80-20, but it's figuring out what are the things that really makes a difference here. I see so many managers trying to run, 40 projects with the teams at the same time. And the thing is, one, they have no capacity to manage it. They don't know what the outputs are. There's no sort of clear goal from the team of saying, this is the one thing we do, or this is the two things we do, right? And I think from a management consulting perspective, at least when I go into a lot of companies, right, just helping them simplify, and that both in terms of management, but also in terms of just delivering results to the teams, right, is that just simplifying and really clarifying your most important goals and clarifying the sort of vision you have to get there. Just it makes life so much easier for people, right? Because most of the time staff are confused. Like I one of the questions I ask in pretty much all staff members when I have a call or a meeting with a bigger company, and it's like, what's the company's number one goal? And the amount of staff members that can actually say something that is even halfway there is scary, because they don't know.
Right.
Because often it's like, yeah, we want to be the best, we want to be the first, we want to blah, blah, blah. It's all thin air, right? But there's not very clear and concise goals in most businesses that helps drive what people actually do on a day-to-day basis. And that, I mean, that in principle, that reflects poorly on management. But again, it comes down to this fact that if business owners haven't learned to do it, then the managers won't either. Right.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Again, a lot of that needs to come from the top, right? And yeah.
I think if I were to use your example where you have, managers that are taking on way too many projects for their team, they, to me, that reads either that manager doesn't care or doesn't know how to protect their team. And I think there is nothing wrong with pushing back and scheduling things accordingly. So not only to, like you said, to ensure quality, right? Because it is so easy to develop a reputation in the business that you don't know how to deliver projects. I mean, I lived most of my adult career in that space, right? It's so easy when you have a bad project to like everybody else to jump on board and stomp you with 2 feet, right? So not only is it protecting the quality output, but it's also protecting the team as far as mentally, because everybody wants to be successful and add value. But it's also about, okay, you can't have one person working on 10 different projects and expect them to have value add on every single one, right? So how are you protecting their team, not only as an individual, but as a department to be successful and to deliver quality and feel valued and deliver value, So I think what I would say is I would go back to the manager and go, okay, so what's going on? Do you feel like you don't have a say in protecting your team with your management? That's a problem. Let's work on a script, okay? Or is it because you don't care? That's a problem. You and I need to have a conversation.
a lot of the time.
Why don't you want to protect your team?
a lot of the time, I think the problem is just that the managers don't know what to do. Like they're so busy just saying, oh, here's a project, let's do it. Here's a project, let's do it. again, for me, one of the most important business skills for anyone is prioritization and the ability to understand what's important. And, particularly the difference between urgent and important is so critical, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think developing that skill, it's one of the things that I think is critical developing in your staff as well. So if you have staff members that do multiple tasks, like even helping them understand from a business standpoint what matters the most. Because if you have staff members doing 5 different tasks, sometimes they won't manage to do them all.
Yeah.
And is the one they don't do the right one? All right.
Do you mind if we pick away at that? Because there's actually 2 organizations I've been working with where not necessarily the management, but the staff members learning how to prioritize their work has been a real struggle, right? So I can offer, like, you can organize your day this way. You can organize your day this way. You can organize your day this way. You got to find one that works for you, right? You can verify, you can check, all those kinds of things. You can get the 2 people you're reporting into to make sure that they understand competing priorities. Like, we can work through all of that. There are people that they have to be told day after day, day after day, what to do. And I am finding, like, I'm a bit older, I am finding that this is growing and growing and growing, where people just don't want to take responsibility for their day-to-day delivery of what they're going to, when they have competing priorities, they just it feels like they're more comfortable in the spin instead of getting themselves structured. Do you see that, or is that just me? Is that just me and the companies I've been working with?
So I get where you're coming from, totally. There's definitely, by nature, there's people who are better at taking direction, and there's people who are more assertive and more, let's say, self-starters by nature, and there's people who generally enjoy direction more. I totally agree. Again, the thing is, it's still about, if they feel ownership, if they feel valued, they are still comfortable enough doing things that you don't have to babysit them, right? Again, for me, it's often down to management style, and particularly in terms of understanding how to work with those kind of people, because reality is any people can develop many skills, but often the most difficult ones is really changing your natural behavior, right? And if by nature you are more comfortable getting direction, if you are more comfortable sort of following someone else's footsteps, right, it can definitely be difficult. But I've seen it, like, I've worked with many entrepreneurs, and there is really entrepreneurs of all types of behaviors, right? Some entrepreneurs really struggle because they're used to being led, and they struggle to be the leader. A lot of the time, honestly, it's about learning how to make decisions. So what happens is, and I spent a lot of time in Asia as an example, and in Asia it's a lot worse than it is in Europe and the US. But often, like in Asia, the parents tell you what education to take, what boyfriend, girlfriend to have, and your parents will tell you everything. So they don't learn to make decisions in life before later on. And that's what we see more and more in the Western world, where these kids are basically handheld by their parents for longer and longer, and the parents is like, oh, don't do that. And if something happens to them, the parents are sorting it out. And I mean, one of my worst experiences that I was working at IBM at the time, and we had a guy walking in for an interview, and he brought his mom, expecting his mom being able to join him in the actual interview. I'm like, that simplifies that very, very clearly, right?
Yes.
Like, it's not your mom we hire. I don't care what your mom have to say. at all.
Yeah.
And the fact that you bring her and think she can sit in the interview is enough reason not to hire you, because it tells me exactly what you cannot do, and that's stand on your own 2 feet, right? But I think it's a lot to do with how you behave with people. I've definitely had a lot of people like that I've learned to be more, not necessarily driven, but just learn to take more ownership and responsibility. But yeah, that, I mean, always there's people just by nature that just does it.
I guess I'm just finding that it's like it's becoming more of the norm than it used to be. You know, usually there's a good balance. And so as a manager, you go, okay, you know, because, you know, you have to approach each person that you lead in a different way, right? So it's usually a good balance and mix. And now I'm finding that those people who have to actually be told what to do every single day, like creating that environment of micromanagement that everybody says they hate, right? And no matter how much the managers back off and go, I've been clear, there's instructions, we've built processes, there's efficiency, so you don't have to do, you know, we're using tools, you know, they're doing all the right things and building trust and open conversations, doing all the right things. And then it just feels like that group is getting bigger and bigger, which I guess what I'm trying to point out is my fear is that I feel like management styles are going to switch again. They're going to flip again to where, you know, it is more dictatorial instead of relationship and trust built. But
yeah, I don't think so. I think a lot of it, honestly, again, a lot of it comes to hiring. I think if you hire well, you have a lot less of those problems.
Right.
I think great hiring is the solution to most problems, to be honest.
Problem is most of the time you don't really know what you're getting until they're there. But yeah,
I think most of the time, like I tell every business owner that probably the most important skill for them to develop is recruitment. It's networking. It's too many people hire people at an interview, and the problem is, as you say, you don't know what you're getting, right?
Right.
Whereas particularly if you're in a small business, like the first 3, 4, 5, 6 people you hire in a new company, they're so important. Like if you finally managed to get enough money in to pay the salary for one more employee, like if that employee is a total failure, that you can literally break the neck of the company, right?
Absolutely.
So, and from my experience, like the absolute best way to get out there and find great people is networking, getting to know people, and ideally finding people that you know before you have to hire them, just because it significantly increases the success of it increased the likelihood of a failed hire significantly, right? Now reality is all hires are human beings and stuff can happen, right?
Sure.
You know, sometimes an amazing human being come to a rough patch in life, or you know, stuff happens, they get divorced, or a parent passes away, or something happened that just pushes them out of course, right? And you can never predict that, but everything else being equal, right? The more people you know, the more you know about people before you hire them, the more likely you are to not make a faulty hire. Right. So excellent. Well, I think that was a great discussion so far. So thanks. Just a couple of questions before we finish off. So the first one, what's the biggest mistake you have ever made as a leader?
I think I would say earlier in my career is assuming that I understood my team and that they understood me. Just because when I'm talking or working with somebody and I understand what I'm saying, I probably didn't spend enough time verifying that they, one, understood, and two, were on board. So I think, I don't know if I can do one event as far as that, but I think my biggest learning lesson coming up in management, because I started really young through a very bad situation, being thrown into a leadership role. I had to sink or swim, right? So I think the one thing I learned was, that you can't communicate enough. Like over communication is perfectly okay. And communication isn't always talking, it's also listening, and it's clarifying and making sure you understand, and maybe not jumping into decisions and taking a step back and thinking about it and then having another conversation. So yeah, I think my biggest lesson was removing all the assumptions.
Yeah, I don't even think over communication is a word. I don't think you can do it too much. Fundamentally, right? And I would say, yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. I think a lot of the time as well, it's easy to put your thoughts, to put your motivations on other people. And that's definitely one of many mistakes I've done a few times at least. Whereas
that personality, right? That's me. I'm
exactly.
a driver. I'm a driver big time. So there are times if you don't speak up and I see your head nodding, that's what we're doing. We're going for it, right? So I have to really pull myself back and go, okay, makes sense to me. Everybody's heads are nodding yes, but
and that's I guess that's one of the other big things, right? Like a lot of the time, really, when you're sitting with a team, like learning to talk last or learning to get out of your team what they have to say.
Being comfortable with dead silence.
Yeah, but really learning to let your team speak before you do, because it is, I mean, everyone does it. It's universal, but when the leader speaks, most people shut up or just agree, right?
Right.
And that's definitely been one of my big lessons throughout the years. So, yeah, excellent. Well, last question then. Any amazing resources or anything for a business owner or a manager out there that, want to up their skills a little bit? What has been one of your favorite resources?
Oh man, I'm not prepared for this answer. So I read a lot. I read a lot of books. But yeah, I read a lot of books, or I do audiobooks if I'm driving or whatever. And again, like I said, I think everybody has a good point somewhere, so I think if you go into them with an open mind and understand that you're not supposed to follow this book from the first paragraph to the last paragraph and like make it work for you, it's, take the information, whether you're watching even a YouTube video, right? Like take the information and understand how you work and understand your team. And is there pieces in there that can elevate your game, that completely shift your game? Like understand that when you're looking for information, that one thing that can change your approach could make all the difference in the world. So I think that's why a lot of people avoid reading because, or just learning because they feel like, okay, this is the script, this person. It's just like, when you read a diet book, right? So, I have to do all these things in order to be successful. No, you have to figure out the one thing in that book that really applies. So I think one thing I would recommend is don't be afraid to just consume information, consume it in your spare time, book in time to read and learn. Yeah.
What's one book that you really enjoyed then?
It is a book that's from the Arbinger Institute. It's written as a story. And essentially it's learning about just in life, not only in management, how to view things from other people's perspective and how we always unconsciously, we look at things as we feel like they should be done. So we actually kind of create situations.
Just lastly here at the end, if people have been super excited and enjoyed listening to this, and if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do so?
So there's various ways. So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's just LinkedIn, Renata Porter, Renata Porter. Then I have renataporter.com. And then if you're in the sports arena, I have yoursportsresource.com. Or, if you want to send me an email, rp@renataporter.com. It's really easy. I don't have a lot of social media. I do Instagram. That's about it. But everything else is on the website.
Awesome.
Yes.
Renata, thank you very much for joining me today. It was
thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Wonderful.
Excellent. And to the audience, we'll be back again next week. Thank you for listening all the way to the end.
Thank you for listening to the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Please leave a review. It means the world to us. You can also learn more about management at madsingers.com.